So it's my distinct pleasure to introduce to you our leader, a very reform-minded leader, the President of the United States, George W. Bush.
Carlos, thank you. Gracias. Thank you all. Not so fast, Senator. Carlos, thanks. I appreciate your service, Carlos. Thanks for agreeing to be the Cabinet Secretary. Thanks for leaving the private sector to come to Washington and bring your family here to serve our country. He's going to be a great secretary. And for those of you who are here who work in the Commerce Department, you're lucky to have him as a boss. Welcome. I appreciate my friend Orrin Hatch joining us. Senator Hatch, thanks for coming. Senator Hatch and Senator Cornyn from the great state of Texas are leaders when it comes to legal reform. I want to thank you for being here. Congressman Bob Goodlate from the great state of Virginia is with us as well. We're honored 3 members took time out to come and hear this, what I think is a vital discussion about how to make America the best place in the world to do business. Welcome. Glad you all are here. I want to thank the entrepreneurs who are here, the small business owners and the association members, people who care about legal reform. I appreciate you coming. I also want to thank our panelists. We're going to have an interesting discussion about why we need to do something about class action lawsuits. That's what we're here to discuss. I do want to put it in the larger context, though, about why we even ought to take on this issue. As Carlos said, lawsuits are, a litigious society is one that makes it difficult for capital to flow freely. And a capitalist society depends on the capacity for people willing to take risk and to say there's a better future, and I want to take a risk toward that future. And I'm deeply concerned that too many lawsuits make it too difficult for people to do that. And so I've called upon Congress to work with the administration on legal reform, whether it be to reform the asbestos litigation issue or medical liability reform to make sure medicine is cost effective to our citizens, or whether it be class action reform. Legal reform is part of a larger agenda to make sure this economy of ours continues to grow. We're seeing good growth now. As you know, last month, in the month of January, the country created 146,000 new jobs. The national unemployment rate is down to 5.2%. This is all progress, but it's important for the Congress to work with the administration to keep this progress going. And so legal reform is part of a strategy for economic vitality and growth. So is a disciplined budget part of that strategy. I submitted a budget earlier this week. I'm not surprised some people are yelling about it already, but it is a budget that is lean and effective and says we'll spend money on programs that work. And I look forward to working with Congress to get that budget passed. It is time for Congress to pass an energy bill. We've been debating it for too long, and now is the time for action. And I'm confident we can get it done. I believe that Congress has heard the message from the people that let's work together to encourage conservation and renewable sources of energy, and let's spend money wisely on new technologies. Why don't we promote clean and safe nuclear power, all aimed at not only protecting our environment, but at the same time making us less dependent on foreign sources of energy. So my call to Congress again, like I did a week ago today, was let's stop the debate on energy and get a bill to my desk to show the American people that we can respond. We'll continue to open up markets for goods overseas and at the same time enforce our trade laws. Carlos is going to be a part of the enforcement mechanism of our trade laws. We opened up markets to 12 countries over the past 4 years through new free trade agreements in countries like Australia and Singapore. And over the next 4 years, we'll continue to open up markets. And the reason I believe that is important is because when we're good at something, we ought to make it easier to sell what we're good at overseas and create new customers for U.S. entrepreneurs and farmers and ranchers. If given a level playing field, this country can compete with anybody, anytime, anywhere. And so we're going to continue to work with Congress to advance good trade policy, We'll work on things like simplifying the tax code, reasonable, wise immigration reform, good health care policy, as well as taking on the tough task of strengthening the Social Security system for younger generations to come. Now, I understand some have been listening closely to this debate, and I want to make 2 points about Social Security before we get to the subject at hand. One is we have a problem. For those of you in Washington who say we don't have a problem, all you got to do is look at the facts. We don't have enough people paying into the system to take care of baby boomers like me who are living longer and longer and longer and are going to be promised more benefits. We got more people who are going to be receiving benefits over time with fewer payers into the system. And those who are receiving benefits will live longer and will receive more money. That says we got a problem. It is a funding problem. In the year 2027, the federal government is somehow going to have to come up with $200 billion more than the payroll tax to make sure we fulfill the promise. And the problem gets worse and worse. Starting in 2018, which isn't all that far away, 13 years away from now, the system goes into the red. That means more money coming out of Social Security than going in. Some in our country think that Social Security is a trust fund. In other words, there's a pile of money being accumulated. That's just simply not true. The money, payroll taxes going into Social Security are spent. They're spent on benefits and they're spent on government programs. There is no trust. We're on the ultimate pay-as-you-go system. What goes in comes out. And so starting in 2018, what's coming out is greater than what's going in. It says we got a problem. And we better start dealing with it now. The longer we wait, the harder it is to fix the problem. And secondly, if you're a person who's retired or near retirement, nothing will change. There is enough money. You're in good shape. I know there are some who've heard talk about Social Security around the country who are saying, oops, he's going to take away my check. That's not going to happen. I don't care what the rhetoric is, what the mailings say, what the TV ads say, you're in good shape. It's the younger workers who ought to be asking the members of the Congress and the President of the United States, what are you going to do to fix the problem? And I'm looking forward to working with Congress to fix the problem. All ideas are on the table except running up the payroll tax. And I'm convinced by setting aside partisan politics and focusing on what's right for younger Americans, we can do the job that people expect us to do here in Washington, D.C. All right, here we go. We're here to talk about class action lawsuit abuse. And we've got some experts here to help us understand what class action lawsuits are all about and how best to affect good public policy. Well, look, there is a bill working its way through the Senate now, and I want to thank both Republicans and Democrat members of the Senate for working on that bill. My call to them is to listen to the experts, and we're about to hear from two, actually three. Two people who've studied the issue and one who's actually lived with it. It is important for the sake of this country and for the sake of our economy to have a fair answer to a problem that is escalating. The problem is people are filing suits all over the country in a state courthouse that's affecting people in other states. And oftentimes businesses are getting drug into it, or people are getting drug into it that are unaware they're getting drug into it, or if they are getting drug into it, when there's finally a settlement, they don't get much. And the people, the lawyers get a lot. And so we've worked with Congress to come up with a reasonable solution. And they've come up with a reasonable solution. It says interstate class actions ought to be conducted in a federal court. And my call to the Senate today is to get that bill done as quickly as possible so we can get it to the House and get it to my desk. And the Senate has got to pass the bill on the floor without amendment. They need to pass a clean bill, one that makes sense for the American people. I have asked, and Walter Dellinger has kindly agreed to come. He is a practicing attorney. He is a professor. He's so good at being an attorney, he's teaching others how to be an attorney at Duke University. if I'm not mistaken. He was telling me today, I don't know if you know this or not, but this falls in the small world category. And if our mutual friend is listening on C-SPAN, it'll blow his mind we're talking about him. But I was raised in Midland, Texas, and the fellow who lives across the street from him in North Carolina's father was the baby doctor for my 3 little brothers. Now, how about that for small world? Tell Roden hello. Walter, why are you interested in the issue? He's actually served in government for the previous administration. He represents the spirit needed to have good legal reform, and that is the bipartisan spirit. And tell us why you're here and give us your interest in the subject.
Mr. President, this is a good bill. I've been interested in the problems for the economy for 20 years caused by excessive litigation and tort judgments, excessive punitive damages. It's a very hard problem to get one's arms around, but if you want an opportunity society, you're going to have to get your arms around this problem and make sure that businesses, particularly small businesses, but all businesses, can predict what kind of liability they're going to face. Unless there's some certainty in the legal system, you can't plan. And the result when lawsuits are excessive is consumers pay a higher price. American goods are priced too high because of excessive litigation. That costs us jobs. People don't have access, in some cases, to the products that they need. And it calls into question whether we really have a rule of law. Now, the particular problem that is dealt with here arises out of class actions. Now, let me say, class actions are, properly done, a valuable device. We need a tort system. We need to hold people accountable when their negligence causes injuries. We need them to take account of that when they're planning their products. And we need to compensate victims who've suffered real injuries. And class actions have often been an effective device.
Tell people what a class action is. I mean,
well, a class action, the idea of class action started when we realized that often there were many people that had the same small injury. If I cheat 1 million people out of $10 apiece, I ought not be able to sit back and think, well, they'll never be able to sue me because it's $10 apiece. So if they're really common questions of law and you can resolve the whole dispute in one action, it's a very effective way of doing it. What's happened is that, and I've seen this in my law practice where I represent some defendants just as I saw it as a professor, what's happened is that these cases are kept out of federal courts, our national courts, even though some of these cases have real national implications. They're multi-state cases. And there are a few jurisdictions in our country. Most of our state courts run themselves very well. But there are a few instances where all these abusive cases wind up. Now, one of the things people will ask you, Mr. President, they'll say, well, if it's only a handful of states where the problem is, why do you need a national solution? And the answer is that all of these cases will gravitate. The lawyers that want to file an abusive system will go to those counties in those states where they know where the problem is. Cases from all over the country. It's like having a 50-foot bucket with 3 holes in it. You know, all the water's going to run out. So these are cases, you know, federal courts were designed at the Constitutional Convention so that you would have a neutral court, not one state applying its law to other states, so people could do business anywhere in America and know that they had a neutral forum. It's one of the things that helped us be a great common market.
So in other words, a class action lawsuit that is tried at a state level means you could be doing business in California but be sued in Illinois court.
That's right. And one of the problems is that you sometimes have, in one of these state class actions, a state court judge making law for the whole country, making law for D.C., or for California, for Arizona, sitting right in West Virginia or in Illinois when he's not elected by these other people. And we have a sense that the federal courts, that are courts for the whole country, can fairly apply these cases. Now, when citizens of different states have an automobile accident that does $80,000 worth of damage, they get to go in federal court. And yet, because of the way class action law has been technically written, you can have a multi-million-dollar case involving people from 50 states and you can't get it into federal court. That's not right, and this bill fixes that. And it does so in a way that is very fair. The federal courts have handled class
Let me
action.
stop you before we get to how it does it. Why is it more fair to be in the federal court in your judgment? I think people need to understand that why the remedy is going to make the system more fair to them. I mean, I agree with you completely that there needs to be a judicial system that honors people who've been harmed. I mean, we wanted the system to be fair. If you get hurt, you ought to have access. And yet, on the other hand, we understand the cost of frivolous lawsuits, people just filing lawsuits for the sake of filing lawsuits, forcing people to settle, even though there's no merit to the lawsuit. But explain why going from a state court to a federal court in your judgment would be fair. He actually testified on the bill. So, I mean, you talk about an expert. We're beyond just somebody who theorizes. We're somebody who went up in front, dared go to the halls of the Senate and testified. How did Senator Cornyn treat you?
They did very well.
Yeah, okay,
and Senator Hatch. The problem with having these cases remain in state court is that a few bad state courts will decide they can take all the cases for the country. And they can make decisions that affect citizens in all the states. You're going to hear from Larry Morrell about how that can happen, and you're going to hear from Alita Diktowski about what she ran into. The federal courts are more limited. They're a smaller number. They are not beholden to any one state, and they don't have the problem of one state making laws for the rest of the country. So that they're designed to be there for fairness where you have more than one state and people in more than one state involved. It's one of the things that the framers did when they created this common market. They needed people to be able to go and sell their products anywhere in the country and know that they wouldn't get hometown justice because there'd be federal courts that they could go to if there was a dispute. And that's part of what happens here.
I mean, it sounds reasonable. I think if somebody's out there wondering whether or not this is a reasonable proposal, it's reasoned to use the federal courts for what they were intended to be used for, which is adjudicate disputes among the states, for example. Anyway, why is this fair beyond moving to the federal court? I interrupted you before. You say this bill is particularly fair because?
Well, because it still allows these cases to proceed under the standards we've developed for where you can try cases involving people from different states. You get into federal court, and if some of the harmful amendments that are being suggested are defeated so that you get a clean bill sent to you, the federal courts will do what they've always done. They look at a case involving multiple states and they say, can we fairly try this? Are these state laws sufficiently alike that we can try this in one lawsuit? If they're not, then you can bring those suits back in a single state. Everybody in Pennsylvania can bring a lawsuit in Pennsylvania courts, but you can't do it for multiple states. If you just tell judges you can pick the law of one state, whether people in other states like that law or not. And you're going to hear this afternoon some very telling examples of what's gone wrong when one state makes law for the whole country without the rest of the country being able to participate. People in Texas and North Carolina don't get to vote for who's a state court judge in Illinois. And we don't get to vote on what the law should be in those other places. And this is precisely designed to that. This is a modest bill. It's a measured bill. It moves these to a court system where people can be confident of fair adjudication and still leaves the class action device as something that can be used in proper cases.
Great job. Thanks for coming. Appreciate you taking time. You mentioned, he said, they're trying to amend the bill. That's code word for they're trying to weaken the bill. They're trying to make the bill not effective. That's why I called for a clean bill, and Walter called for a clean bill as well. And I'm confident that the Senate will hear that call and get a good piece of legislation off the floor. Then we'll move it to the House, and then it'll get to my desk quickly, and we'll show progress working together. By the way, I repeat, this is a bill that is co-sponsored with Republicans and Democrats. It's a good piece of legislation. Larry Morrell, what do you do, Larry?
I'm the Commissioner of Insurance, Securities, and Banking for the District of Columbia.
Right around the corner.
Right around the corner. Right across the street.
Right across the street. Well, that's good. So that seems like an unusual connection. Here you are sitting next to the president talking about class action lawsuit, and it seems like you're really not involved with the law, but are you?
Yes, indeed. And let me explain, add to what Walter said before. My job, I'm essentially a state official, and my job is to protect the people of my jurisdiction, the District of Columbia, and in particular those who buy insurance. And I worry about that, and I take that seriously. I implement the laws of the District of Columbia as passed by the Council and approved by the Congress. It's very difficult to do when you've got a judge in a remote jurisdiction making rulings that affect my people without my having a chance to get involved. Let me give you one example. In the state of New Mexico now, there have been 34 separate cases filed claiming that there's a violation of fair dealing in charging a small fee for an installment payment on a life insurance policy. That is, you have a life insurance policy that has $1,000 a year as the premium, and the company says, well, you can pay it quarterly. We'll add $2 to that so that for our administrative costs. The charge made in each of these cases is not that the cost is too high or that it's not revealed, because it is revealed, but that the failure to state an annual percentage rate is a violation of fair dealing. Now, I know, you know, everybody knows that an annual percentage rate is for loans, and there's no loan here. But that's the theory. Now, I say 34 cases have been filed, 7 have settled already.
Yeah.
And the total cost...
They settled not necessarily because of the merits of the lawsuit. They settled for threat of loss. In other words, it's kind of like a lottery sometimes when the system isn't balanced right.
Right. I'll give you some examples of it. The first one settled $7.5 million to the attorneys who brought the suit, nothing to the class members. And those class members are all over the United States, include people in the District of Columbia, everybody who bought a policy from that company. The second one settled for $10 million to the lawyers, nothing to the plaintiff class.
I'm beginning to get the picture of why there's 34 filed, you know.
Right.
Slowly but surely the settlements are getting bigger. Anyway.
Even the Association of Trial Attorneys objected to that one, so they went back and they gave something now to the members of the class. What is it? $100 off your next life insurance policy that you buy from that company.
Yeah.
Okay?
If it's still around.
And that's right. And the lawyers walk off with $10 million. 7 cases have settled. The total payout so far is $40 million. And nothing has gone to trial.
Yeah.
And that's the real evil. Meanwhile, I've told insurance companies that I'm not going to let them use an APR in my state because it's misleading. It suggests to people that a loan has been made when it has not.
Yeah. See, it's interesting. What he's saying is that he's doing his job in the district, and yet a lawsuit that affects people in the district begins to redefine what you've laid out as what is fair.
That's exactly right. I'll give you another simple example. There's a case in Los Angeles Superior Court claiming that one of our very largest companies, State Farm, which is a mutual company, it has too much in reserves and should give that reserves back to its members. Well, what I do for a living is make sure the companies that sell insurance in this jurisdiction, including State Farm, have enough reserves. Right. And the notion that a jury of laypersons in the Los Angeles County Court can overturn my decision about that.
Do your job better than you can.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the part that I have problems with.
Yeah. It's an interesting situation, isn't it? And it's one that really goes back to what Walter was talking about as far as the framers' view of how a fair system ought to work. If I were someone who was out there wondering whether or not we were making the right decision, I would go back and hearken back to the papers of the Founding Fathers when they talked about adjudicating disputes like this. In this case, a jury doesn't make the decisions for the good folks in Washington, D.C., a jury afar. We've also got with us Alita. You ready to go? All right, how many kids do you got?
I have 2 children.
They don't happen to be here, are they?
Yeah, they are.
I can see them. How old are they?
Marissa is 10, and Jessica is going to be 9 in 2 weeks.
Going to be 9.
3 weeks.
Fabulous. Well, happy birthday to B. Got Mom up here on stage. Pretty cool, huh? Where do you live? Where do you live, Alita?
I live in Commack, Long Island.
State? New York?
New York.
Okay, good. Not everybody knows where Commack is. Of course, I did. So why are you here? No.
Well, Mr. President,
Give us your story. This is a very interesting tale.
okay. Well, first, I would never believe in a million years I'd be talking to you face to face.
Yeah.
And I would never believe that I'd be talking to you about my TV set. But here it goes.
This is being recorded on film so you can play it back just to prove it actually happened.
My husband and I purchased a brand new 25-inch television from RCA, Thompson Electronics.
When?
And back in 1995.
Good, yeah.
And almost 2 months later, the TV started going on the fritz every now and then. It was intermittent. It didn't happen all the time. If it was in the mood, it didn't work. Every now and then, a black line. Every now and then, a little fuzz. And we called the company and we said, can you tell us what's going on with the television? Well, Mrs. Dukowski, there's nothing wrong with the television. You have to call the cable company. Call the cable company.
The old runaround.
Exactly. And we ran a few miles there because constantly the cable company would then say there's nothing wrong with the TV. The company would then say, yes, it's the cable. And this went back and forth for almost 2.5 years.
Yeah.
And progressively during that 2.5 years, the TV was getting worse. Instead of it having a bad day once every month, now it's once every day. And it got to the point where I said, you know what, this is definitely a television. This is not my cable, it's definitely a television. And I called the company and I said, look, I know it's a television. Can you tell me what I can do about it? How can I get it repaired? What's the problem? And the woman said to me, oh, you didn't know about that warranty on the internet. And I said, no, I didn't. And she said, oh, well, there was a warranty on the internet. I guess you missed it because now we're in the process of a lawsuit. And I said, what lawsuit? And she said, you'll probably be getting papers in the mail. Within a week later, I got a notice, this class action lawsuit, that gave me a coupon for $50 off a brand new RCA TV if I made a purchase of $100 or more. Now, the last thing in the world I wanted to do was purchase another RCA Thompson Electronics appliance after they have already been so dishonest with me to begin with.
Okay, well, I'm going to stop you there. So you open up the mail,
Right?
and somebody sends you a coupon,
Correct.
meaning that you were a party to a lawsuit,
Exactly.
but you didn't know you were the party to the
Had
lawsuit.
no clue.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Yeah. Whew. First, I'm glad I wasn't the Thompson salesman, you know? I mean, so
Well-
you get the what? You get a $50?
$50 rebate if you make a purchase of $100 or more.
Yeah.
And of course, as I mentioned, why would I want to purchase a product from them again after they've been so dishonest with me? They knew there was a problem with the TV. It was documented in this case that they had this tuner onboard problem where the tuner every now and then intermittently wouldn't work. What happened?
Right.
And they never bothered. They lied to me several times. There's no problem with your TV. You know, it's not the TV, it's the cable. And this went back and forth. And finally, one honest employee told me what was going on.
Right.
And at that point, the fume was coming out of my head. I was so angry.
Man, I can imagine. So therefore, there should have been a recourse. I mean, a just society is one in which she buys a TV that is a lousy product. She ought to be, and there's a warranty, and I mean, there's some protections for a consumer.
Right. Well, the point is,
They ought to be rewarded those protections.
well, and as a consumer of this product, we sent out a warranty card that said if there's a problem with the TV,
Yeah.
the company's supposed to notify us.
Right. And so the TV company was wrong, and so and the verdict was guilty, and you got $25.
I got a $50
$50,
rebate
sorry.
to go buy a new TV from them.
Yeah, I know.
Which,
So it made you even hotter.
So why did you get such a bad deal?
well, as I was going to tell the president, that I just found out that the lawyer in this case, who took this case to a very small court in Madison County, Illinois.
Oh yeah, I've been there.
Madison County. I am going
It is
to
the most.
write
There
a
are more
movie.
lawsuits filed in Madison County, Illinois, than anywhere in the country, I think. I mean, I went there to talk about legal reform in Madison County, Illinois. There are people filing lawsuits there all the time. You had your case heard in Madison County. I cannot believe it. Anyway, keep going.
Right. Well, apparently this lawyer, and nowhere is it in the fine print of this little $50 coupon, that this lawyer got $22 million.
We got a problem.
$22 million. I'm still left with a broken TV. He got $22 million. Where is the justice in this?
Yeah, and that's exactly why. Thank you. We're all here because we want the system to be fair. The economy depends upon a fair legal system. You know, people's faith in the system, our country depends on a fair legal system. And what we're highlighting here is the system isn't fair. And the positive news is, in this town, people have come up with a fair solution that will treat people with respect and give them justice when they need it, and at the same time hold people to account when they need to be held to account without affecting our capacity to grow our economy. Fairness is all we ask for. You know, the scales of justice need to be balanced, and they're not balanced today. And so good people from around the country, including Walter and Larry, have come to the halls of Congress to help balance those scales. And fortunately, there are good senators and fair congressmen who understand that all we seek is balance. And now's the time for the United States Congress to balance the scales when it comes to class action lawsuits, to do their duty to make this country as good a country as it can possibly be. I want to thank our panelists for coming. I hope you've enjoyed this as much as I have. I'm honored that you would take time and stay over from getting back home to help explain the need for this country to act on this important issue. Thank you for coming. God bless.